Hello and good afternoon. I am Rana Dubrow. I'm a member of the CURT staff, and we are thrilled to have Teresa Magnus and Kathryn Ely presenting today. Some quick housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded, and a link will be sent to all who are registered by the end of the week. During the webinar, please feel free to type your questions in the chat box. I'll read them to Teresa and Kathryn towards the end of the program. Teresa Magnus is familiar to many of the CURT members. She is a co-partner of Domain Wellness, as well as the principal consultant of Magnus & Company, a construction and management advisory firm. Over the past 25 years, Teresa has provided her knowledge to improving the construction industry. Teresa is both an attorney and a CPA, as well as actively involved in her community. I recommend that you check out her full biography, as I've only touched the surface. Joining Teresa is Kathryn Ely, also co-partner of Domain Wellness. Kathryn is a licensed counselor and a purpose and productivity coach, and runs a podcast entitled Imperfect Thriving. Kathryn's education is a mixture: political science, psychology, clinical mental health, and she also has her Juris Doctor from the University of Alabama School of Law. Together, Teresa and Kathryn are presenting Building Mental Wellness, a Blueprint to Thrive workbook. We begin with Teresa Magnus. Teresa, we're all yours.
Thank you, Rana, for the introduction. We're very happy to be here today and to talk with everyone about a topic that is a passion for both of us. We hope that we are putting forth ideas. CURT has always been an incubator of new ideas and a group of people who have always taken action when action has been needed. And so we're excited to get into this topic. We do have time reserved at the end for questions, but the chat box will be available throughout our presentation. As a quick overview, we're going to discuss the risk factors for mental illness in the construction industry. The studies have shown crazy people don't go into construction. This is actually something that happens to people while they're working in our industry. We're going to quantify the impacts of mental illness on the performance of companies and projects. We'll talk about a return on investment for implementing a mental health program in your organization or on your projects. And then we're going to talk about the components for building a resilient workforce, both for the individuals, but also for the organizations. And that's where we'll introduce the materials that we've developed. Before we get into those topics, I just wanted to frame the conversation with a few statistics. There is a sea of research. The earliest study that I found drawing a correlation between the high rates of suicide and workers in the construction industry is from 1984. And there wasn't a long break in that research. So consistently, research has been performed, studies have been performed, and journals documenting this correlation and the growing problem. So again, here are a couple statistics to frame the conversation. Construction workers are 6 times more likely to die by suicide than in workplace accidents, which is an amazing statistic when you consider the level of effort that we put into a physical safety program and maybe have failed to address the mental safety of our workforce at the same time. Second statistic, the suicide rate of construction workers is 3.7 times the national average. So you're 3.7 times more likely to take your own life if you work in this industry. And then to break these statistics down, and these statistics come from the CDC's Morbidity and Mortality weekly report. This in broad industry terms are the suicide rates. This study had male and female data. Most studies do not break it down or only address male rates. These rates, in case you can't read the footnote, are per 100,000 civilian, non-institutionalized working people. And so as you can see, mining, oil and gas extraction, and construction are on top of the list, and the industry rate is 27.4. The next slide gives us a little bit more detail. It breaks those industries into occupations specifically. And so you can see artists and musicians, fishing and hunting workers are the only classifications or careers above the construction industry. And this breaks it down then really by your craft workers, iron workers, of course, having this top rate. So what that statistic means is that 79 iron workers for every 100,000 workers take their life. And as you work down through the list, I've highlighted the construction industry careers: ironworkers, millwrights, brick masons, roofers, laborers, finishing crafts, carpenters, welders, but construction managers also made the list. And so this is, again, compared to an industry average of 27.4, so almost double on the construction manager list. And that's one of the only management type or white collar careers that made this list that is above industry average is in the construction managers. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Kathryn, and we're going to review the risk factors in our industry that lead to these types of statistics.
Thanks, Teresa, and I thank you all for having me here. I'm glad to be here, and I hope to get to meet you all in person one day. So let's talk about risk factors, the demands of the industry. Now, a risk factor is something that increases the risk or susceptibility of something else happening. For instance, anxiety and depression are risk factors for suicide. In other words, if an individual suffers from anxiety or depression, he or she is more likely to commit suicide than someone who does not suffer from anxiety and depression. So what are the risk factors in construction and extraction industries? The first is travel, right? Unlike an office job or a virtual economy worker, the construction and extraction industries require workers to travel to the location of work. This means time away from home, isolating workers from families, from communities, hobbies, faith, and other valuable aspects that balance the individuals with their careers. Traveling, including any amount of time away from home, is a risk factor for those working in the industry. Travel presents many threats to overall health, including stress, sleep interruption, unhealthy eating, unhealthy drinking, lack of exercise. Researchers have found a strong correlation between the frequency of travel for work and a wide range of physical and behavioral health risks. So those who spent 14 or more nights away from home per month had significantly higher mass body index and were more likely to rate their overall health as poor. They were also more likely to admit anxiety, depression, alcohol dependence, no exercise or physical activity, smoking, and sleep issues. Now, those who traveled 21 or more nights on the job were 92% more likely to be obese than those who travel 6 nights or less. So travel is a big risk factor in this industry. The second big risk factor is lack of connectedness and strain on relationships. Social connectedness and close relationships is one of the most fundamental aspects of human life. To deny anyone social connection has profound psychological implications. In fact, so much so that historically, denying social connection has been used as a very powerful form of punishment. I mean, that really bears repeating, right? Denying social connection is a powerful means of punishment. Individuals make huge efforts to socially belong, and it's been said that connectedness, we have a universal need to belong. Without feelings of acceptance, notions of friendship, and appreciation in forms of close reciprocal relationships, human life is significantly reduced in meaning, has or may not have any meaning at all to some. So where social relationships are deficient, individuals are of course going to consequently feel lonely. So in addition to fulfilling the need for belonging, connectedness, and having other effects on workers' health, social connectedness leads to 50% increase in longevity. Social connection strengthens the immune system, and people who have stronger connections to others enjoy lower rates of anxiety and depression and have higher rates of self-esteem. So that leads us to our next risk factor in the industry, which is loneliness. When we don't experience the connectedness that we need as human beings, we experience loneliness. Loneliness predicts depression. It's linked to dementia, Alzheimer's, high blood pressure, alcoholism, paranoia, anxiety, and can lead to suicide. Prior to the pandemic, loneliness had hit epidemic levels, leaving organizations searching for ways to intentionally increase connectedness in the workforce. Now, while some workforces have been forced to isolate their workers at home and work remotely, construction and extraction have continued to work in the field on projects. And so what this has led to is isolation from the connectedness with family, right? We have to keep them on the job and on the site to create less contamination and less COVID spreading. So this has increased the loneliness in the industry. The next risk factor is unemployment uncertainty. Think about the sting of rejection. Similar to loneliness, the feeling of layoffs, even in the best conditions, is still rejection. The fear of the unknown future of employment, needing to relocate, financial strain, and other uncertainty create stress and anxiety for employees in the business. And in construction, it is common for employers to not pay field workers on the days interrupted by weather. Think about that for a second. What if you weren't paid one day because it rained or because of the snow? How would you feel with a week of rainouts? What kind of stress and pressure would that put on you financially to have your family miss a week of your pay because of the weather? What is it like for a worker who never knows how long his or her current job will last and what his or her next job will be? The complete lack of financial security in and of itself is enough to cause anxiety, which left untreated can easily be compounded by depression. So in construction, travel leads to time away from personal relationships and a lack of connectedness, which is a basic human need. Stress on the job makes it difficult to find connection there. Therefore, missing connectedness with family and friends when out on the job leads to loneliness. Loneliness is a risk factor for depression, and job and economic insecurity also adds into the mix for a perfect recipe for ill mental health and suffering. Next slide, Teresa. Okay, so thank you. So now we are on to what the expectations that we create and expect of the workers in the industry, what sort of distress and ill mental health that can cause. So what we expect of workers in the construction and extraction industries exceeds those of any other industry when it comes to number of work hours, the level of physical exertion, the lack of benefits, and the lack of time and paid time away from work. Projects in these industries are planned to require extended overtime, working through weekends, and preventing workers from balancing their days with time dedicated to exercise, hobbies, continued education, and families. A study of construction workers revealed that 68.2% of those asked suffered from stress, anxiety, or depression as a result of the job. Additionally, 68.2% experiencing these problems, only 6% of them actually took time away from their job to work on their problems. What this means is that the majority of the workers experiencing these issues on the job continued to be present physically at work while arguably functioning at a diminished capacity. This statistic also indicates that the culture in the industry is such that suffering employees feel the need to keep their problems to themselves and not reach out for the help that they need. Finally, the study further revealed that 61.9% of those asked experienced stress, while 48.4% suffered from anxiety and 18.5% suffered from depression. Now, those in the study cited the following as the main causes of stress on the job in the construction industry. Lack of feedback. It's not a general practice in this industry to have a formal annual review process or feedback loop. In fact, if asked about reviews, many construction frontline supervisors admit to only providing negative feedback to workers, and generally this is at the time of termination. So what does this do to the worker? If you're only receiving negative feedback, the individual will most likely only talk to him or herself in a negative way. In other words, he or she will begin giving only negative feedback to themselves in the form of self-criticism. And if only receiving negative feedback, then the worker begins to worry about stability of his or her job, leads to low self-esteem, low self-image, anxiety, and depression, which are also risk factors for suicide. Another cause of stress is poor communication. Frontline supervisors in construction industry are generally promoted into their role for their ability to produce work and not necessarily because they are the best at communication. Poor communication leads to workers having to guess about what to do and how they're doing in their job. Lack of ability to predict outcome produces and causes anxiety. Another stressor, inadequate staffing. Ask a general superintendent or construction manager what the optimal staffing rate for a project, and you're most likely going to hear 80 to 90% of what is needed. If it's not always exactly what is expected of us that causes our stress, often it's the pace at which we are expected to work that amps up the stress levels and makes it seem like we don't have time to even meet our basic needs. You know what it feels like when you've overbooked your schedule and you haven't even left time to take a breath. Imagine being like that daily in your job. Another stressor, too much work, right? Maybe related to inadequate staffing factor or related to the expectation for production, but many workers feel like they're expected to produce more in a day than what is actually physically possible. When we are overwhelmed with the amount of work expected by us in an unreasonable time period, we begin to tell ourselves, I don't have time and I can't do it, which increases stress and decreases productivity, because then you are up in your head, stressed out about what you have to do and less capable of doing it. Another stressor, ambitious deadlines. It's an ongoing joke, and one that's really not too funny, that construction will make up all the wasted time on the front end of a project, right? Another stressor is pressure. The industry puts a tremendous amount of pressure on craft workers in a situation in which they have little or no control. Over the last half century, management has slowly removed the responsibilities for planning and executing work from the craft in the field. Instead, now you have teams of people in the trailers and officers around the world packing the work, building the plans, fabricating the materials, creating the schedules, and it's all put on the craft workers to get it done. This lack of control over their own situation, coupled with unattainable standards for the amount of work expected or the amount of time expected to complete the work, is like being put in a pressure cooker. Another stressor is conflicting demands. Be safe, hurry up, work here, move over there, train this person, speed up. Conflicting demands can lead to either decision fatigue, what do I do first, or being pulled in too many directions at the same time, which can lead to overwhelm, causing anxiety. Studies show that both professionals and trade workers in the industry show signs of ill mental health that are showing up in their lifestyle, their physical work, their physical health, and their work engagement. So now let's move on to risk factors in the industry. The culture of the industry, right? There's tough guy attitude, there's lack of time management skills, and unhealthy coping skills. So, workplace culture, I think I can best explain it in a very simple equation. Lack of help seeking plus poor coping equals mental ill health. It's really that simple. The tough guy culture makes it less likely for an employee to get help when he or she is experiencing psychological problems. Researchers believe that employees in construction are unwilling or afraid to seek help due to the inherent culture in the industry. This culture does not provide a safe place for employees to believe that they can seek help. When an individual is in mental distress without help, employees must attempt to handle their mental distress alone. This leads to poor coping and mental exhaustion from the pain. Escape from this pain and mental exhaustion is often the reason for suicide. Men especially wait too late if they get help at all, because asking for help when it is not encouraged is seen as a sign of weakness, and no one wants to appear weak in this industry. Time management, typical poor coping strategies in the industry. The same study revealed that personal factors of poor time management skills and low self-esteem were indicated by the construction professionals and trade workers as factors that can make them vulnerable to psychological conditions. These poor time management skills can trigger these stress conditions. An individual with low self-esteem is vulnerable to psychological conditions for several reasons. On the other hand, good time management skills and positive self-esteem mitigate or lessen the impact of all kinds of stressors in the workplace, enhancing these employees' psychological health and well-being. So like I said earlier, instead of seeking help, poor coping strategies mostly adopted by construction professionals and trade workers to deal with their psychological conditions have been self-blame, disengagement, isolating from others, increased substance use, poor sleeping habits, and poor eating habits. Think for just a minute the effect that all of those coping mechanisms and coping strategies have on an individual and how this individual is going to show up for work with a lack of sleep, with drinking too much, with poor eating habits, and self-blame? Are they going to be able to safely and effectively focus on their job? Lack of sleep and poor eating habits, such as under or overeating, are unhealthy coping strategies, which could eventually lead to various forms of psychological conditions, as well as poor physical health, obesity, hypertension, diabetes. Substance abuse, of course, leads to addiction, failed relationships, once again affecting the individual's connectedness. According to construction professionals and trade workers, the most significant effects these conditions have on the construction industry are low productivity and job performance.
So what is the impact of these factors, of the psychological impact that Kathryn has discussed on the performance of our projects, of our company, and of our economy? The World Health Organization estimates that poor mental health costs the global economy $1 trillion annually in lost productivity. When you look at the definitions of lost productivity, absenteeism is on the top of the list. People who are not able to come to work because of their mental and physical health. Second on the list is presenteeism, people who come to work but are not productive while they're there. I wish there were comprehensive studies from the United States, but there aren't any. So we've relied on comprehensive studies completed by PricewaterhouseCoopers and Deloitte & Touche in Canada and Australia. Those studies found that the cost of poor mental health affects their economies in Canada by 50 billion and in Australia by 11 billion. But the same report, the Deloitte report in Canada, projects that by 2041, the impact of poor mental health on the Canadian economy will be $2.5 trillion. And these studies were completed before the COVID-19 pandemic. And so there has not been any research completed subsequent to the pandemic. We're still in the pandemic, to say how this trend has been accelerated and what the new forecast is for mental health impact.
Teresa, can I interrupt you there for just a second? I have read the studies on anxiety and depression overall, not just in the construction industry, but in our country in general through COVID. And now it is more than 1/3 of Americans report depression or anxiety, and they do not expect these numbers to significantly decrease. So if you look at what has been reflected in the construction industry versus the regular public, the numbers are typically higher there. So if 1/3 of our country is experiencing depression and anxiety now, I would expect that the numbers in the industry have gone up as well. Go ahead.
And so when we look at more specific examples of the direct and indirect costs, we can begin to start to develop a quantifying of mental health impact for our own projects and our own organizations. So we've included some examples of direct and indirect costs. On the direct cost side, I've mentioned absenteeism and presenteeism. People who are not psychologically and physically well don't come to work. When they're not at work, the loss of productivity, but also the impact that it has on their working crew has a detrimental effect on the performance of their organization or their project. Presenteeism, of course, is coming to work and not being productive. The short-term and long-term disability claims relate to people who are seeking treatment through their employee assistance programs and through their disability programs for the treatment of mental health and physical health illnesses caused by the stress of their positions. unemployment insurance, the cost of employee turnover, the cost of management having to dedicate time and effort and resources to resolving absenteeism, presenteeism, and turnover, but also incident costs and healthcare costs are all examples of direct costs that are related to mental ill health in the industry. On the indirect cost side really relates to how it affects everyone around them. So the culture in the organization, what is the impact to the culture and to the way the employees engage with each other at work, the cost to the community when people become mentally unwell at work. How does it affect their families? How does it affect their marriages, their relationships with their children, their ability to contribute to their communities through religious organizations or social organizations? But it also affects the ability of companies to recruit and retain talent in their organizations. Cultures that are damaged by having psychologically unsafe workplaces or by fostering cultures that advocate unhealthy coping or any of the other risk factors are not engaging environments for recruiting and keeping top talent in an organization. And then of course, there's the toxicity that's caused by absenteeism and presenteeism. People become very resentful of others on their crews or in their teams that are not able to pull their weight because they're not mentally engaged when they come to work. So, return on investment for implementing a mental health program in the organization. One of the starting on the positive side, happy workers, people who are excited and engaged in their careers are more productive, are absent less, are more focused, cause less drama. They don't quit their jobs. They perform better and they achieve better results. The Canadian Standards Association issued a report and they said workplaces with a positive approach to psychological health and safety are better able to recruit and retain talent, have improved employee engagement, enhanced productivity, are more creative and innovative, and have higher profit levels. So these are your qualitative return on investment, but there's quantitative as well. I mentioned the PricewaterhouseCoopers study in Australia. They studied companies across all industries that implemented mental wellness programs. They did not differentiate in their study between full-blown large programs and smaller programs that maybe had fewer features. And they also did not separate their research amongst industry, yet they still show very positive results. 230% return on investment is the average return for companies in Australia implementing mental health programs. The Deloitte study in Canada yielded similar results across all industries. They saw a return on investment of 200% plus for organizations that implemented basic mental wellness programs as part of their organizations. Bell Canada was, of course, achieved a very high result. They saw a 410% return on investment for the implementation of a mental wellness program for their employees. I think this is a strong indicator for our industry because utility workers are very similar in nature to the construction industry, and there is an overlap in electrical workers and in other specific career categories between utility industry and the construction industry. But there are some more. Public companies with mental health programs outperform their peers that do not in the S&P 500 index. The growth seen by companies with mental wellness programs averages 235% versus the S&P average for companies that don't of 159%. And then alignment with shareholder ESG. So the World Economic Forum released ESG metrics in September of 2020. The metrics require investment by company in governance, social, and environmental programs. On the social side, it focused a lot on the physical and mental well-being of workers. For a company to achieve a high metric in the social category of an ESG rating, a company must implement a mental wellness program. And that's an indication from ESG investors, ESG-driven investors, that they're looking for companies to implement these programs and to demonstrate high results. They're looking for companies to take better care of their employees. And so I think this is a good time for us to pass off to Kathryn to give a better definition for the group on mental health and the program that we're advocating.
Thanks, Teresa. So mental health is defined by the World Health Organization as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. How do we ensure good mental health for ourselves and your employees? We start with the framework of the 8 domains of a healthy life. Your life is made up of specific connected areas or domains that are all important to some degree to your quality of life. If you're completely satisfied in your domains, you'll have a higher quality of life. When you have a higher quality of life, you have good mental health. So your domains and what is important to you within your domains, your values, is your compass or your guide toward a satisfying and fulfilling life and away from ill mental health. Anytime you take action that moves you toward what's important to you, you're moving closer to good mental health. So when I read the domains to you, you'll see that the workplace represents a domain on its own. Pursuit, excuse me one second. Teresa, can you, excuse me, can you read the domains?
I can. So we'll start with the domain at the core, which is mental and physical well-being. Without having mental and physical well-being, it's not possible for you to pursue any of the other domains in your life. You have to be physically and mentally well. The second domain is pursuit and finance, which is your career. It's your job. It's your financial stability. It is what you do as a career in your life. The third domain is intimate love relationship. So that is an intimacy with a partner that fulfills the need to have love and intimate love in your life. Kathryn, are you ready or should I keep going?
I'm ready. I can't seem to completely clear my throat. So sorry. So which one were you on?
I did mental and physical wellness, pursuit and finance, intimate love relationship.
So then we have parenting and family, spirituality and faith. I'm so sorry about my voice. Friendship and community, personal growth and learning, adventure, artistic expression, and leisure. So these are the 8 areas of life that are important to each of us in varying degrees. If only one domain is given all of our time, effort, and awareness, all the other areas are going to suffer, and we're going to fall somewhere on the spectrum between dissatisfaction with our lives, anxiety, depressed, so sorry, or even suicidal. So what factors make up a mentally healthy workplace? Security and psychological safety, belonging, social justice, self-worth, self-esteem, self-efficacy, accomplishment, and autonomy. And I'm going to skip ahead and not go into too much detail with those because I don't have a voice.
I can finish this slide. So the idea between these two slides, what does mental health in the workplace look like, and how can companies support the development of mental health in personal lives? It's important for companies to look at this holistically. The idea that we have, the approach that Kathryn and I have taken, is that this fits very well into a company's existing environmental health and safety program. It is the mental health component. And it isn't enough to say, well, I'm going to provide a psychologically safe workplace and I'm going to help my employees while they're here at their job. It also must include the emphasis of mental wellness in their personal lives as well. Because as you see from the 8 domains, your financial pursuit is only one domain in your life. There are 7 other domains. So when we talk about a work-life balance, the time that you spend at your job is a third of your life. And so what you're trying to cram into the rest of it are all of those other domains. And so an organization that wants to support mental wellness of their employees takes into account the entire program. How do we help our employees achieve a high level of satisfaction in each of the domains as that individual prioritizes those domains in their life? And so there is a component that needs to be developed in an organization that looks at how do we treat our employees. We've outlined for you today at a very basic level in 40 minutes, a very broad topic. We've outlined for you high-level risk factors that impact the mental wellness of a workforce. And so taking that into account, an organization can look at how do we treat our employees. The other piece to that is what tools can we give our employees to help them balance the other domains in their life, to teach them how to prioritize and then put effort into their domains. And these two pieces that Kathryn and I have developed are designed, again, to fit into a company's existing environmental health and safety program and to put the tools into the hands of the individuals to teach them how to prioritize and invest their time into their domains to achieve a higher level of satisfaction, but also through the values journal and organizer to change some of the bad habits that they've developed working in this career and to values journal. And Kathryn, I hope you can share briefly, we are running short on time. If you could share briefly the value of value journaling.
Yes, I will do my best to find my voice again here. So value journaling is so critical. About 20 years ago, they did a study at Stanford over winter break, and they sent the students home and asked them to journal about their personal values. And what they found was those students who wrote about their personal values were healthier, they experienced fewer illnesses, had better energy and attitude than the students who didn't. Now, I know we didn't all go to Stanford. I know I didn't, but 100 different studies since that one has replicated the same results across all different subject groups. So writing about your values has actually been found to be one of the most effective psychological interventions ever studied. In the short term, writing about values makes us feel more powerful, in control, proud, and strong. It also makes us feel more loving, connected, and empathetic toward others. So in the long term, writing about values has been shown to reduce doctor visits, improve mental health, and help with everything from weight loss to quitting smoking and reducing drinking. So we have incorporated into the Values Journal Organizer. It has several components all meant to help those in construction and extraction with the actual issues that they face in the industry with time management and the calendar component. And then it addresses, helps you find a place to organize all of your physical health and your mental health in one tool.
All right, so I saw a hand go up and question. Rana, if you want to start firing away with the questions.
Absolutely, thank you. And thank you both for the presentation. We have one question about, will we learn some examples of what a mental health program consists of?
So we have highlighted the mental health in the workplace components, and 40 minutes is just not long enough to get into it. The idea is that an organization looks at how they themselves manage the risk factors and how they help individuals manage the risk factors, and the way that they execute their projects or manage their organization. There are 12 components of a psychologically safe workplace. So that's just the first bullet alone. But the research on psychologically safe workplaces, I think, is one tool that we use in working with organizations to help them build the psychologically safe workplace. The second component, of course, is what tools you put into the hands of your individual employees to help them self-help for the remainder of their domains. The Building Mental Wellness Workbook is a workbook that is based on acceptance commitment therapy. And it walks a person through the 9 steps of acceptance commitment therapy process, and allows the individual and encourages the individual to self-explore. I feel like you would give a better answer to this component, Kathryn, but you know, the idea is to give a workbook to an individual to help them work through the process, and then behind that to have the organizer that includes, as Kathryn described, the values journal and the time management tool to help an individual develop the skills they need to keep their life balanced.
I think that was a great answer.
Okay. So we have another question here. Where does the United States, as compared to Australia and the UK, rank in treating mental wellness as a priority with employees?
Well, I think the lack of research on return on investment for programs is probably a strong indication that the United States has not put effort into it. In performing the research for the work that we do, it's easy to find journals, studies, papers on the correlation between suicide and construction and extraction workers. It's easy to find research on the risk factors that cause mental ill health in those industries. The problem has been researched to death. What you don't see are you don't see any studies on programs that have been implemented broadly. There are examples. This country is not without examples of companies. There are companies who have implemented mental wellness programs. And if you talk to them about the results that they see, they would put a $2 to $4 an hour return on investment on their own program. But there isn't a similar emphasis here as to what you have. A lot of what I have seen over the last year and a half has been an emphasis on suicide prevention and organizations advocating for hard hat stickers with suicide prevention hotlines. And while crisis management would be a component for any company's mental wellness program to have a plan in place for dealing with a crisis for somebody who has already reached a point of contemplating suicide, we see this very differently. It was actually a hard hat sticker being the solution to the problem that initiated the conversation that Kathryn and I first had, and really the reason for developing a program was we could not find examples of companies, large examples of companies that had implemented programs, and we felt like this was an area where we could develop tools to at least help people get started.
Okay. This is a very quick question here. What does ESG stand for?
It stands for environmental, social, and governance, and it's a Wall Street term. It is for socially minded individuals, investors, socially minded investors that are looking to invest in companies that take a more socially progressive view. So companies that are achieving environmental goals, achieving governance goals, but also achieving social goals. And so the most comprehensive definition you'll see is in the World Economic Forum metrics guideline for ESG that they published in September of 2020. In that, they define the metrics and how they score public companies. And I guess any company can be scored with these metrics, but it is a rating that all public companies are pursuing. Interestingly enough, in the social component, there is conversation both around physical wellness. So they discuss recordable incident rates and fatality rates, but also having a mental wellness program.
Do you feel that the ISO 45001 MH framework will be adopted by the majority of businesses in the USA within the next 2 to 5 years?
So I'm not familiar with an ISO standard on mental wellness if it is related to this. I'm not familiar with it. I can say that I haven't read a lot about it and haven't seen a lot of conversation about it. And that would be, the best indication of an answer I could give.
Can you please share a goal and leading indicators example for mental health wellness programs at the workplace?
Yeah, so we could treat this like a target zero approach. In my mind, this is very similar to physical safety programs. When I started in the industry, my first safety training focused on eliminating fatalities on project sites. The first major industrial project that I ever worked on had 3 fatalities, and the safety director told me that was that's just part of the industry and that I should get used to it. Over the next couple decades, we learned that focusing only on preventing fatalities was not enough. And to be successful at eliminating fatalities, we had to go all the way up the chain of events and say, how do we prevent unsafe acts? How do we make our workers more aware of the hazards? And how do we teach them to work safely? And I think a similar approach to this is exactly what the industry needs. If we want to eliminate the suicides in our industry, We need to go all the way up the chain of events, and we need to say, how do we teach our employees to live happy and satisfying lives? And what tools do we need to put in their hands? And how do we need to change our workplace environments to achieve that? I can also mention that in the study on Bell Canada Bell, that they had over 100 KPIs that they used to measure the effectiveness of their mental wellness program that they implemented for their company and for their employees. And those 90 KPIs focused on some of the costs that we highlighted, the direct and indirect costs, but also feedback from employees and other key measurements on the engagement and the productivity of their workforce.
Okay. Well, we have concluded the questions that are in the chat box. I do want to highlight the fact that everyone will be receiving the slides as well as a link to the recording from today. And further, the contact info for Teresa and Kathryn, if you have specific questions that you would like to refer to them. Thank you, everyone, for participating in today's webinar, and especially to our speakers. We look forward to having you join us at another one of our CURT events. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.